Hey, what's up, guys? X Morgan with My Spiritual Life. I got my Jared helping me out today. Dibs. Okay, so today we're talking about how to talk to your religious family members about the gospel or church history, like things you don't like about it.
The gospel. That was weird hearing you say that.
Like gospel things you don't agree with, right? Like,
this is how we're going to talk about the gospel of Jesus Christ.
So here's my first tip.
Don't criticize it ever. The gospel of Jesus Christ, that is.
Just stop! You ruined my joke. Okay, redo. Here's my first tip. Don't do it. Don't talk to your family about church history. And I know some people are going to disagree with me. But I don't know what to say.
You're wrong.
Okay, here's my point. It is innate in us to want to save everyone when we first feel like we're set free to the truth. But unfortunately, the sad truth is a lot of people don't want to be set free from the truth, and it can seriously damage or ruin your relationships. Now, that being said, I think there's a time and place for it, and that's why we're going to give you tips on how to do it more effectively.
You're going to do it anyway. Might as well do it. All right. I think there are times that it can be helpful to talk about it because, like, especially if they ask about it. And also, there's certain, your family members better than we do, so there's some of them that might be, like, in a place where they can hear these things, and this is just some advice on how to sort of present it to them in a non-combative way.
Yes, yes. Again, everyone's situation is different, and my general advice is to stray away from it just to avoid causing more conflict in your relationships. But that being said, sometimes it's really important and necessary, and I think being honest is important. I just think what we attribute a lot of times as ex-Mormons to, like, talking to our family about church history is like just slamming the church to them and just yelling about it, and that is exactly what doesn't help anyone.
It's actually our friend Sean Escobar likes to talk a lot about this. I like a lot of things he says about this because he talks about when he left. You get that feeling, like, because when I left it, I learned some unsavory things. Like, I learned about the book of Abraham and things like that, and I was like, well, this can't be true. and it just was instantly like, oh, okay, it's not true. And you do kind of get that in your head that, oh man, they don't know about this. And if they did know about it, they would do the same thing that I did.
Right.
And you'd think that, but it's not the case. A lot of people either don't want to hear this stuff or will remain steadfast believers even after knowing this stuff. Yeah. So that's Sean in our recent video, where we interviewed a bunch of people, he actually said, you're not as convincing as you think you are. So just kind of move on.
Like, live your life. That's what's important. Okay, so that being said, if you want to talk to your family about the gospel and church history,
the gospel,
then here's some tips we have for you guys. So my first tip is to use lots of I language and make it about your feelings. And what I mean by that is to say, like, I found out about da-da-da-da-da, and it made me feel da-da-da-da-da. It's a very good formula, much less attacking than Joseph Smith is a pedophile, and the church is evil, and they're just out to take your money, and da-da-da-da-da. That automatically makes your family really defensive. They're not going to listen to anything that you say. And especially because you are representing everything that they've been told you would be as an ex-religious member. Someone who's bitter and angry and A, B, C, D, right? So the more you can just say it from this perspective of, I feel this way about this thing I learned, the more you can kind of deflate the situation and not put them on the automatic offensive, like, position of wanting to fight.
And you're not you're not telling them how they should feel about it either.
Yes.
Like, I felt terrible when I found out about early Mormon polygamy. If you say that, then it's not, you know, pushing it in their face. If you say Joseph Smith was a pedophile, that's very charged language. It's actually, like, pretty literally untrue as well, and so it kind of hurts the argument more than anything. They're going to get angry because now they either have to defend a pedophile or explain why he wasn't a pedophile, or they have to feel pressure to also feel the same anger. So don't put the pressure on them to feel the same way that you do.
And so I find this very helpful, and I think sometimes the reaction to that is for someone to be very dismissive, and it can be frustrating. So you can say, well, I found out Joe Smith was marrying young girls, and it really bothered me. And like, you can say that, and then they can say, well, I knew that, and it didn't bother me. and like, it can feel like this very dismissiveness. And that's where you have to say, well, I'm glad that you feel happy with where you're at. But for me, this is something I find very upsetting, you know? And so just, again, like, not being attacking, not telling them, oh, you're wrong, or you're stupid, or you're a terrible person, you don't care about young girls, or something like that. Just like, okay, that's your experience, this is my experience. So,
and it's also important to give them somewhat of the benefit of the doubt, because that does seem like one of the things, like a guy marrying underage girls, that does seem like a thing that you should pretty obviously be against. So give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, that it's not that they're okay with a guy marrying underage girls, it's that they're, in their mind, they're telling themselves, there has to be more to this situation than I know about right now. There has to be some different explanation.
Right, I know the church is true, so there must be something else I'm missing. So your advice you had mentioned was remain unemotional. And I know I just said make it about your feelings, but this is a different kind of advice. So go ahead, remain unemotional.
So mostly what I mean by that is to not use that charged language that we're talking about.
To not be super angry, right?
So I took a little bit different of a route. And when I would talk to Morgan about it, I usually wouldn't even use I language, but I also wouldn't use the you language. I would say some people think this, some people think this.
You did do that.
I separated myself and Morgan from the situation, and I would say, like, she'd be like, well, what do you think about
the Book of Mormon?
Yeah, the Book of Mormon. I'm like, well, I don't know a ton about it. There's some people that know about this view of the Hebrews book that he had. Some people believe the Spalding theory. A lot of people think the Spalding theory is nonsense because of this. I would give her a different point of views that weren't necessarily mine.
It left me so much less attacked. Like, I felt so, like, safe when you would just present this stuff. Like, and so to clarify, Jared left the church before I did, and so we would have these conversations, I being the believing member, and that's so funny. I totally forgot about that until you brought it up, but I felt so much less, like, on the defense, because I'm like, oh, he's just telling me, like, there's all these different opinions, and, like, I was so much more open to having a conversation about it, and just understanding where he was coming from better was really helpful for us, even if I had never left. And I was much more willing to have a conversation when I didn't feel like I had to be defending my stance.
And I would tell her when I thought something wasn't very credible, because she'd ask about polygamy, and I'd say, well, there's, some people have, there's this evidence that Joseph Smith basically cheated on his wife, and the apologists will say this about it. I don't know that the Brian Hale's argument is very credible, because he's, you give credit where credit's due, because I'd say he's a really well-versed guy. He probably knows more about Mormon polygamy than anyone else. I just think his conclusions are batshit. I don't know, I would take my emotion out of it, and I'd say I wouldn't show her the anger that I felt over it, because you got to find somebody that you can scream about it to, because I had my friends that I would yell those things about Joseph Smith being, oh, he's a piece of shit, he's a liar, he's a con. Did you know he did this and this and this and this and this? But
right.
Somebody who's a believing member isn't necessarily ready for just an itemized list of everything, especially from somebody who's angry about it, because the more angry about it you are, the less credible you seem, because, well, you're acting based on your emotions. You're drawing conclusions based on something that made you angry.
And anger comes from Satan. No, really though. It's another aspect of this. So it's super important to not let your family be the landing board for your anger. It's just going to damage your relationship with them and make you not a trustworthy source to talk to, even if they ever did have questions. So find someone, because it's normal to feel angry when you're leaving a high demand religion. It's just part of the process. Find someone that you can outlet that to safely. And then from there, then go, if you feel the need, then when you talk to your family, try to remain as unemotional as you can, as far as just not being so angry. Again, easier said than done, but I think it's super important, and I think it makes you seem more credible, and it, again, facilitates more connection and communication than yelling and shouting. So the next topic was be fair.
I'd say it's important because we really don't want to do this as a fresh, angry ex-Mormon. You have that thought of, why would you be fair to the church? They weren't fair to you or whatever.
Right. Explain what being fair means.
So when I say be fair, I mean be fair in your criticisms of the church. Like I mentioned, the Spalding theory, right? That's a theory about Solomon Spalding, something about, I don't know, like a book he had written that may have closely resembled the Book of Mormon, but it's now dismissed by even a lot of ex-Mormons. And that, I like that they're willing to do that. I like that when ex-Mormons are willing to look at a criticism and they're able to say, this isn't a fair criticism. It might look bad on the church, but, I mean, A, it's not true, and B, it'll look even worse on us.
Yeah.
It's important to be fair in your criticism of the church, because if you're not, then you seem like you just have an axe to grind.
Right.
And
you lose credibility.
And you want your positions to be ironclad. This isn't just in regards to the church. This is in regards to everything. If you start letting yourself throw unfair criticisms at the church just because, the ends justify the means, or because, well, he doesn't play by the rules, why should I play by the rules? If you start doing that, you're going to be intellectually very weak. You're not going to be able to, your positions won't hold up to scrutiny because they're founded on nothing.
And if your family catches you saying something that doesn't hold up to scrutiny, then they're going to call everything that you're saying into question, even if you feel like you bring up a lot of valid points.
For example, there are a large number of people who suspect that John C. Bennett performed abortions for Joseph Smith's polygamous wives. The problem is, there's no real documentation of this. We don't have any real account. And if I'm wrong about that, then by all means, throw it in the comments. That'd be really cool to find out about something like that. But I haven't found any credible evidence to believe that. And so if I were to just kind of hear that online and then throw that out, like, well, your church is against abortion, but Joseph Smith was fine aborting the kids of his polygamous wives. If I threw that to Morgan,
when I was still believing.
Yeah, when she was still believing, she might have gone and researched it and found out, well, that's not actually a fair criticism because there's no credible evidence of that.
Right.
Then I'm ruined.
Right,
like, she's not going to come to me anymore.
Right.
Because
I'm not going to believe anything you say.
Yeah, why would you?
Right. And I think you really, as hard as it is, you cannot bring these things up to your family with the intention of trying to change their mind. Because it's up to them if they want to be open and if they want to learn more. And if they're not, you got to let it go. And And so I think these conversations can be really important sometimes, because sometimes they really do want to know, or sometimes it's really important for you to explain to them, especially if it is a spouse. I think that's even more important. But you got to keep in mind that if you go at this with the intention of trying to change their mind, you're probably going to walk away disappointed. And that that's not your job. Like, you can't take that role on. Like, all you can do is, this is something that bothered me and here's why. And you gotta, like, leave the rest to them, because you can't force them into this decision. You can't force them out of this perspective. And the harder you try, the more it's only going to damage the relationship, because they're going to want to withdraw from you if they feel like you're forcing something down their throat that they don't want. And you're going to feel the same way about them if they're forcing the gospel down your throat and you don't want it. So it's like, you gotta, as hard as it is, like, you gotta have that space, you know?
Definitely don't get mad at them when they don't have the reaction that you want. Because you can bring this stuff to their attention, and they might do something dumb and just start bearing their testimony to you. I think it's dumb. I think it's intellectually weak. But don't say that, because it'll ruin your relationship. I think it's also part of their conditioning, because as missionaries we were told that don't argue with people if they start bringing up things that are troubling you. Just bear your testimony. And so I understand being enraged by that, but don't get mad at them. Like, that's what they've been told to do. And you getting mad at them is only going to confirm their suspicions that you are an angry ex-Mormon led by Satan.
Yeah. I don't like using the word dumb, because I'm like, they really are just trying to do their best. I don't know, sometimes. I try to give people the benefit of the doubt, but...
Well, I'm careful when I said that's a dumb thing to do.
Yeah. No,
I don't think they are dumb people for doing it.
No, I know.
I think the reason I think it's important to make that distinction is because I think it's okay in your head to think that's a stupid thing he just did. And you can understand maybe that's a dumb thing, but you don't tell them, you don't be like, you're dumb for doing that dumb thing. Don't even tell them it's a dumb thing. You gotta be patient, because you gotta understand that smart people can do dumb things, and you gotta remember all the dumb things you did, because we all did.
Yeah. I think another thing that can help is if you approach the conversation with this attitude of, I'm concerned. Like, I'm genuinely concerned, and here's why. And I think, again, it kind of comes back to what I said before, but just having that, like, Mom, Dad, these issues are concerning me, and having that approach as, instead of that, oh my God, I can't believe I've been lied to. It'll make the conversation go so much differently. Another thing we wanted to bring up is it's important to have the confidence to say, I don't know, in some of these conversations. And that can be really, really hard to do. Because especially when you first leave, you don't know a ton about church history. Maybe you only know a little bit, or maybe you know some, but you're not good at repeating it. And you just feel like, I don't know how to answer all these questions that they're bringing up. And I think it's important to have the confidence to say, I don't know the answer to that. And that it's okay. Like, you're okay with it. And because when you leave God's true church, the reaction of your family is to be like, well, what now? You must have found something way better than God's true church somehow. So what is it? And like, you got to be comfortable saying, I don't know. Like, and that's just hard to do. And especially when your whole life you've had the answers to everything. One other good phrase to use, that I got this from Katie and Alan Mount from their Marriage on a Tightrope podcast. They said, that doesn't work for me. I love that sentence. That doesn't work for me. Because it's non-attacking, and it's just stating your true feelings about the situation. Like, the Mormon church just doesn't work for me in my life and my family. Like, that's just not where we're at. And it's just a great way to say what you feel, but also not be a jerk and create all of this awkward tension with someone.
It's also something that completely doesn't compute in the mind of a Mormon. So it's something that they are going to be like, what? And they might think about it a little bit, because it's the gospel. It works for everyone. It's a universal truth that is the best path for not only the best, but the only path for everyone. So saying, maybe it works for you, but it doesn't work for me. That's a very confident statement in and of itself, and it would be very perplexing. I think I said something like that to one of my friends when they asked me. They kind of just finally, he was like, "Dude, I gotta know where are you with the church stuff?" And I didn't really know what to say. It kind of caught me off guard, and I think I just said, "It's not really my thing."
Right.
He was like, "Not your thing? What do you mean?" Like, it was so bizarre.
It created curiosity instead of shutting down, like, for needing to defend, right?
Well, and they're used to, like, the sort of caricature of an ex-Mormon that you have in your head when you're a Mormon is that they are angry. They are actively trying to tear the church down, and they don't acknowledge that maybe some people do want to be Mormon. And you saying, it doesn't work for me, implies that it can work for some people, which is kind of like
atypical, maybe, from what they would expect you to say.
Yeah, it puts them on this unexpectedly safe ground with you, and they're like, and they're not expected to feel okay after you answered that. So now I'm like positively suspicious or something. I don't really know how to say.
Right. No, I think the more you can create curiosity instead of confrontation, the more you can actually connect and have a conversation instead of just yelling at each other, hopefully. So, yeah.
I think everybody has different principles, but I think one principle that maybe ought to be universal is truth. And if what you are doing is searching for truth or reality or whatever you want to call it, and you are able to constantly remind yourself, because there will be times when you feel attacked, when you're feeling defensive. If holes are poked in your argument, you will feel sort of vulnerable and defensive, like you want to lash out. But you got to remember, the holes are being poked in my argument. They're not being poked in me. What I'm here to do is to look for truth. And if I'm looking for truth, well, I mean, if I don't have the truth, it ought to be harmed. It's that J. Reuben Clark quote. So we need to apply it as ex-Mormons just as much as Mormons need to. That should be at the absolute pinnacle of your values as a person. Is to be like, if my opinion isn't true, I want to know that it's not true. Now, it doesn't mean that Mormonism's true. But if they poke holes in what you're saying, take it as an opportunity to build a stronger idea. Truth should be your ultimate goal. I feel pretty comfortable saying. I don't generally feel comfortable telling people what their ultimate goals should be, but I think I'm fairly confident that truth should be a first principle for everybody in the world.
I think it can just help you take the criticism less personally, even if you're caught off guard. If you're like, well, ultimately, I'm just looking for truth. And so, you brought this point up and I'm going to look into that. Or let's talk about it or whatever. Like, again, just keep it unemotional as much as possible.
If your goal is to find out what is real, what is true, then you're not going to be hurt by conflicting evidence. Like if somebody shows you, if somebody says, well, no, actually, it turns out there were horses in America this whole time. We just found out. Don't get mad. Right. Find out if it's real. Because if it is, that's no longer a valid argument, and you have to use a different one.
Be patient with yourself. Be patient with your family members. This is really hard. These conversations are very, very difficult for both sides. They really, really are. And I think they really are important to have in certain cases. So again, just approach it carefully, and table the conversation for later if needed. Like, just say, you know what, I think things are getting a little heated. Maybe we should both take a step back and think about this, and we can talk about it another day. You know, there's nothing wrong with saying that, because sometimes you can just see that it's not going anywhere productive. I hope you guys found this video helpful. We have a prompt for you guys to answer, which again, you can answer in the comments below, or you can click the link to join our Facebook group and answer the prompt there so we can have a conversation about it. The prompt is, what advice do you have for people when talking to their religious family members about church gospel issues or history? And like do's or don'ts, very helpful. We'd love to hear some of your guys' stories as well, because that's always really, really helpful. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please hit that subscribe button, because our baby is due March 12th. And so we are going to need to take a little hiatus from the channel to sleep, or well, really to not sleep. And so please hit that subscribe button. It'll really help us to keep the channel afloat while we are gone. And we'll see you guys in the next video.